Well, hello again. Wow. We move into a new building for our Kenosha campus, and the energy level has gone away. I don't know what just happened. We're going to start by welcoming everybody. So for those of you in our Kenosha campus and our Racine campus, we want to say hello. For those of you who watch online, hello. And to our Weekends on Wednesday campus, all right, we'll coach them through it. By the way, I noticed I'm looking like directly in the middle, like I'm talking to a camera, and the camera is like over here. So I'm gonna figure this out here. Guys, we are in an exciting season at Great Lakes Church. So much going on. We, of course, have a new building for our Weekends on Wednesday in Kenosha campus. Oh, look at that. We have recently painted more than 20,000 square foot of kids space at our Racine campus. We added a student ministries pastor here to our Kenosha campus who's going to join us in February of this year. We're aggressively looking for a campus pastor for Racine. We're dedicating children in a couple of weeks. And on top of all that, we are launching a relationship series next month. Ooh, so lots of fun stuff going on. And then to top it all off, we are launching a brand new series today called Standout. And in this series, what we're going to be doing is looking at what it takes to create and live an exceptional life, to have a life that is above average. Anybody can be average. Hospitals can be average. Fortune 500 companies can be average. Restaurants can be average. When it comes to pizza, we know that Domino's is average, right? Pizza Hut, average. Mod Pizza, that's above average. And one of our staff members this past week, Tony Peterson, had put on his Facebook page about how his daughter Claire had earned a coupon to Pizza Hut for reading books. So she was going to get this free pizza, but instead he ends up bringing her to Mod Pizza. And when he was about to order, he handed one of the employees his phone with this message. It said, "Mod, please. My daughter is going to give you a coupon for a free pizza, but I don't want to go to Pizza Hut. Yuck. I will pay for her pizza. Please take the coupon and throw it away." Now that's a great dad. And for those of you who know Tony, he is definitely over the top. He's over the top in many areas of life, but specifically when it comes to food. And his attitude toward food, and specifically in this case, his attitude towards pizza, is, I think, if we were to just to peel back all the layers, the same attitude so many of us have towards life. We don't want to settle for average, right? We don't want status quo. None of us grew up thinking, my big goal in life is to have the same kind of life as everyone else. I just want to be like everyone around me. I want to raise average kids. I want to be an average parent. I want to be a mediocre employer or employee. I just kind of want to be a run-of-the-mill friend, right? Nobody thinks that way. Which is why when I say, hey, we're going to spend the next several weeks confronting this whole idea of being average, nobody gets all that tense. Nobody seems to care. If I said we're going to spend the next month talking about prayer, you get a little tense. We're going to spend the next month, we're going to talk about generosity. We're going to spend the next month and we're going to talk about how to read the scriptures. There'd be a little bit of tension because those are areas that we realize and recognize, hey, we probably could grow a little bit. But when I say, hey, we're going to talk about and confront this idea of not being average, of living a life that's above average, none of us really get all that tense because none of us put ourselves in the category of average. We don't see ourselves as average friends or average parents. Most of us don't think we have an average level of intelligence. In most arenas of life, we see ourselves as above average. I've never been out with a dude for the first time, hanging out, and said, tell me about your wife, and never had a moment where he looked at me and said, well, I'll tell you about my wife. She's kind of average. She's okay, I guess. Right? Nobody says that. But the truth is, this concept of average isn't made up. All right, this is a concept that just didn't come out of the blue. It comes from somewhere. It's a very realistic representation of who you and I are collectively. Now, of course, we could argue we are above average because we live in America. And as Americans, we're certainly above average, right? We have above average education. We have above average opportunities. We have above average income. And certainly those things are true, but at the end of the day, we're still just average. The average American spends 103% of their income, which of course doesn't work out all that well in the long run, but that's average. The average American spends more than 7 hours every single day staring at a screen, whether that's their phone or a TV screen or a computer screen. The average American is more than 23 pounds over their ideal weight. True that. Right? The average American hates their job, and most of the time it's because of their boss, which is why I no longer manage staff at Great Lakes Church. I want to just keep the peace. Right? There are hundreds and hundreds of surveys and independent studies that have been done for marketing purposes that help companies know what the average person is like so that they can market to us and they can sell to us. So they know a whole lot about what average individuals look like. So if you're the average American dad, you have roughly 27 hours of free time every single week in which you're engaged in entertainment and leisure. Now, when I read that, 27 hours, 27 and a half to be exact, I thought, if someone has that kind of free time, and apparently that's the average, that's like 5 rounds of golf a week, like I hate you, all right? That's just a lot of time. But the average dad, 27 and a half hours of leisure time, free time, and 7 hours they spend with their kids. I don't know. Another average for Americans is the more money we make, the less percentage-wise we tend to give. And this isn't like a religious statistic or a church statistic. This is just a generosity statistic. In general, the more Americans make, the harder it is for us to give, and the less percentage we give. And then probably my favorite statistic, and this is true like all the others are, the average American, our attention span is 8 seconds long. And the reason I like this so much is it means we've been edged out by the goldfish, which has a 9-second attention span. All right, there you go. That's us as Americans. Now again, I'm going to say it. We don't think of ourselves, for the most part, as average. And even though we don't think of ourselves, especially in the important areas of life, as average, the fact is, just by default, just by nature, just by the reality of life, we are average. And if we're not careful, that's where we're going to get stuck. We're going to spend our whole life being average. Now, I read a book over the holidays called The Circle Blueprint. And the big idea of the book is that if life was a circle, we get to, through our behavior and through our habits and our choices, we get to influence how large that circle becomes. Now, for the sake of this series, what I want to do is I want to use a sphere, all right? Because the sphere is unique. It looks more creative and colorful than a circle. But when you and I are born into this world, what happens is God gives you and I a personality. He gives us passions. He gives us gifts. He gives us opportunities, likes and dislikes. We are absolutely unique as individuals. And pretty much throughout all of our childhood, this is what we continue to look like. We take what God's given us and we pretty much just use it on ourselves because we want to stay feeling secure and we want to be comfortable and we want to experience pleasure. And so for most of our childhood, this is just kind of what we look like. We've got all this uniqueness, but it's all being used on ourselves. And as children, that's what people would expect. But here's the deal. As we become adults, if we want to continue to prioritize and pursue in our life comfort, security, and pleasure, this is as large as our circle and our influence is ever going to become. Okay, it's never going to grow. It may start to grow for a season. It may start to grow and influence where our gifts might be growing, our personality might be enlarging, and how we learn to use it in different settings and socially. But ultimately, we're not going to be able to have the substance and structure to sustain that, and so we will never be able to grow in a significant way for an ongoing basis. And we will end up spending the majority of our lives, if not all of our life, swimming in the ocean of mediocrity. So I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. God didn't create you to be like everyone else. He made you unique. King David of Israel recognized this, and he actually expresses gratitude in a prayer that he writes to God. He says this. He says, "Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it." God has given us passions and personality. He's given us experiences and opportunities. And if you choose to use what God's given you primarily on yourself, seeking out comfort and security and pleasure, the sphere and the impact of your life is never going to grow. And when it does start to grow, if in certain seasons it starts to grow, it will not have the structure and it will not have the substance to sustain it. It's always going to default back to very limited influence. And of course, this is where most people end up. But again, in our lack of self-awareness, we don't kind of see ourselves as this. We see ourselves as above average, especially in the important areas of life. Now, maybe you are an exception. Maybe you say, you know what, Dave, I kind of get what you're saying, but I do see myself as average. Right? I'm kind of over here, and I think when I look at the talents God's given me, I have fewer than most people. My personality is kind of blah. When I talk to people about my interests, they're just kind of boring to most people. And so, yeah, I just don't see myself as an above average person. I would see myself as average or maybe even below average. Here's the deal. Regardless of which end of the spectrum you fall in, I do want to make it very clear that God did not create you in a unique way so that you could spend your life being average. God didn't create you, He didn't create me in a unique way so that we could spend the rest of our life being status quo. He created you to be different. He created me to be different. He created us to be a standout and to grow in our influence and to grow in our potential and to grow in our gifts, to make a difference in the world in which we live. Big idea for this series, which is on the bottom of your note sheet, is this: average is always a safe choice. And it is the most dangerous choice you can make. When you and I become comfortable with status quo and just going through life, ho-hum, not being intentional to maximize what God has trusted us with, we become average. And average is always a dangerous choice. Why? Because average people spend more money than they make. Average people live life, and for the most part, they're unaware. Average people are unhappy in their relationship with their significant other. Average people are unfulfilled in their jobs. At the end of the day, average is the most dangerous choice we can make because we just end up wasting our lives. One of the disciples of Jesus was a guy named John. And towards the end of his life, John decides to write a letter. And he writes this letter to individuals who are in danger of kind of going off the rails in their morals and off the rails in their ethics, kind of just getting off track in life, and quite honestly, just getting stuck in average. And he's writing to a group of people who are heavily influenced, as we are, by the teachings of their day, by the culture in which they live. And so he writes this letter, and he reminds his readers of this reality. He says, the Spirit who lives in you is greater than the spirit who lives in the world. He says the Spirit who lives in you has the ability to empower you to become more loving and more generous and more inclusive and more compassionate and more forgiving than everyone else around you. And if you are a follower of Jesus, I want you to know the Spirit of God lives in you. And through His Spirit, He wants to maximize your talents, not just for your benefit, but for the benefit of others. He wants to maximize your resources. He wants to maximize your personality, not just for you, but for the people in your world and the people around you. And so throughout this series, we're going to talk very specifically about what that looks like. But today, as we're just kind of kicking off this series, I want to take a step back and I want to look at a fundamental difference between people who are average and people who are above average, people who are standout. And the cool thing about what we're talking about, not just today, but throughout the series, is if you're not a follower of Jesus, you're going to embrace a lot of what we talk about. Like if you feel like I'm just kind of new to following Jesus, or I'm not real comfortable with all this stuff, I'm just kind of learning, you're going to walk away saying, you know what, I actually get what Dave was talking about. And at some level, you may even say, I totally embrace what he was talking about. So what's the difference between being average and being a standout? Well, here it is. Average people focus on what they want to do. Standout people focus on who they want to be. Okay, so average people focus on what they want to do. Standout people focus on who they want to be. Let's look at this first one for a second. Average people focus on what they want to do. Now, it is a good thing to know what you want to do with your life. All of us should know what we want to do with our life. Here's the thing about average people. This is where they get stuck. This is where they live. This is where they focus. I mean, think about this. Anybody can tell you what they want to do with their life. If I was in charge, here's what I would do. If I could determine what my life looked like, here's exactly what it'd be. You can ask someone in first grade, and they can tell you, when I'm older, I want to be a basketball player. I want to be a rock star. I want to be a police officer. Right? From very early on, we know what we want to do. Almost anybody can paint a picture of what they want to accomplish or achieve in this life, whether it's written down or it's just something that is somewhere up in their brain, their head somewhere. Well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to do this for a career. I want to make this kind of money. I want to retire at this age. I want to vacation in these locations. I want to go to school at this college. I want to have this many kids. Most people have a bucket list of some sorts, and I'm going to say it again. That's a good thing. We should all have a bucket list. We should all have things in our life that we want to do and accomplish. But this is where average people stay. This is where average people obsess. This is where average people focus. Everything's about what they want to do, what they want to accomplish, what they want to achieve. Standout people are different. People who are above average have a different focus to their life. Standout people focus on who they want to be. And I'm not talking about, well, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a school teacher. I'm talking about who they want to be on the inside. So just a couple days ago, I was reading this article that quoted the billionaire Warren Buffett as he was talking about what to look for in great employees. And here's what he said. He said, you're looking for three things generally in a person: intelligence, energy, and integrity. And if they don't have the last one, don't even bother with the first two. Standout people prioritize integrity and character. They realize that integrity and character is the substance of life. They know that as they're growing in their passions and in their gifts and in their personality and in their resources, that if they don't have substance, it's always going to go back to where they started. They're going to lose the very things they worked for so hard. Now, this isn't something that we can afford to put off until the day we achieve what we consider to be success. Because the reality is, as we grow, we really just become more of who we are. So if we're people who lack character, we can grow, but we're just going to have more influence and still not have character. We're going to have more opportunities, but we're still going to lack character. In 2007, Adolf Merkel was the richest man in Germany. That was worth $12 billion. And then about a year later, he made some financial decisions that cost him dearly. He ended up losing about $3 billion. Okay, which means he was no longer the richest man in Germany, as he had been. And he was still a billionaire, still had a lot going for him, but he felt like a failure. He felt like a total loss, and so he wrote a letter to his family and he killed himself. The structure and the substance of his life did not have the ability to withstand the pressure of losing. As large as it had become, he still felt like a failure. Status meant more to him than significance. Now compare the story of Adolf Merkel with J.K. Rowling. Okay, last year, J.K. Rowling was bumped off the list of billionaires. A very exclusive list. You may have heard this. Okay, she was totally bumped off. And the reason she was bumped off was in part because of how much money she had given away. Her whole attitude towards money has pretty much been this: I've been blessed with a lot, and I think it's my responsibility to be wise, she says, and to give intelligently. Now, of course, we can dismiss a story like that and say, oh, come on, if I had J.K. Rowling's money, yes, I would be generous. But the point is this: generosity is not something that develops after we win the lottery. Character is not something that develops after a big, significant event happens in our life. It's something that happens very early on. So average people don't think much about who they want to be. Their focus, their obsession is what they want to do. And that makes sense, right? Because we live in a culture that's constantly pushing us to accomplish and to achieve and to do more and more and more, which can be a good thing. But it's always a mistake to decide what you're going to do with your life before you first determine who you're going to be. And the reason it's a mistake is because eventually, it might not be today, might not be next month, might not even be in the next year, but eventually, who you and I are on the inside is going to show up in what we do. It's going to show up during our college years. It's going to show up in our dating relationships. It's going to show up in our business transactions. It's going to show up in our accomplishments and in our careers. Who we are as individuals is eventually going to show up in what we do. And I don't need a bunch of illustrations for you, because all you need to do is go home and watch the news. All you need to do is open a newspaper, flip through a magazine, and every single day it seems like there's some super wealthy individual, some CEO or religious leader or celebrity or someone who got to a point in their life that they were either respected or they had money or they had power, and then they took an ethical risk or a moral risk and completely lost it all. And from our perspective, we just sit back and we're like, what just happened? Why would they ever take that kind of risk of losing everything they had worked so hard to acquire? It just drives us nuts, because we're thinking, my goodness, if I was married to her, I wouldn't have screwed that up. Right? If I had that much money, if I had that much influence, if I was the CEO, if I was as famous as they were, I would never have risked it all. Why would anyone do that? Well, the answer is simple. It's because every single day we live in a world that pressures us in the areas of accomplishment and achievement. What are your goals? Where are you going to go to college? What does your portfolio look like? Who do you know? Who are you connected to? But nobody is pressuring us in regards to who we are on the inside. And so it doesn't even shock us anymore when we see a supermodel or a celebrity or a comedian, CEO, right, totally shipwreck their life. It doesn't even shock us. And the stories are always the same, right? They open up and say, my life was shipwrecked, but it was because what nobody knew is I was battling insecurities. What nobody knew is I had some addictions going on. What nobody knew is I had some anger issues that were unresolved. This is why, I'll say it again, it is always a mistake to decide what we're going to do with our life before we first determine who we want to be. Your talent and passion, your personality, your giftedness has the ability to carry you way past what your character can sustain. And if you do not have the substance and you do not have the structure in your life, it's always going to be, at some point in your life, a loss. So if you want to maximize your potential, if you want to be a standout in this life, then you must decide what you're going to do with your life. That's important. But before you do that, you must first decide who you're going to be. If you want to maximize your potential, if you want to be a standout in this life, then you have to decide, before you determine what you're going to do with your life, you must decide who you're going to be. So if you've got this big idea, hey, someday I'm going to get married. In fact, I'm hoping this year I find my husband, I find my wife. Then the first question you ask isn't, what's the best dating website to go to? The first issue to address isn't, what are all the character traits I want in my future husband or wife? The very first thing you do is step back and determine who you want to be, the kind of husband and the kind of wife you want to be. If you're saying this next year, I'm hoping to get a new job, I'm hoping to launch into a new career, it's 2018, I'm hoping some things move in my direction, the first question isn't, what's the best paying job out there? It's not, who should I be networking with? What site should I submit my resume to? The very first question you ought to be asking is, what kind of employee do I want to be? who we are on the inside is a big deal. This is why when Moses was feeling overwhelmed as the leader of Israel, his father-in-law Jethro takes him aside and has a talk with him. And he says, Moses, I noticed that you're exhausted. You're spending all day long in meetings. He says, you're spending all day dealing with the stresses of life, and I'm telling you, it's affecting you. You're getting emotional. You're getting angry. If you're not careful, your life's going to spiral out of control. You need to address this. And then his father-in-law gives him this advice. He says, surround yourself with other people who can help carry the load, who can deal with this person, with the burden, because the person you're becoming is not who you want to be. And in Exodus chapter 18, we read the qualifications that Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, gives him to say, hey, you need to be looking for these qualifications in the people you surround yourself with. And they're listed in Exodus chapter 18. Here are the 4 qualifications. He said they need to be capable, they need to be honest, they need to have a reverence for God, and they need to hate bribes. Now just look at that list. Only one of those qualifications speak to competence. They have to be capable. The other 3 speak to character. They have to be honest. They have to have a reverence for God. They can't be influenced by bribes. And we see this priority on character placed all throughout the scriptures. Average people focus, they obsess, they live all about what am I going to do? Standout people, above average people, focus on who they want to be. Now, this isn't going to be an earth-shattering statement, but I'm going to say it anyways. Right now, this moment, you are somebody. Okay, the events, the experiences, the choices in your life have shaped the person you are at this moment. You are somebody. And all throughout 2018, you are going to continue to be influenced by events and experiences and choices that you make, which means when we get to the end of this year, you're going to be, and I'm going to be, a different person than I am right now. Okay, we might be just a little bit different. We might be drastically different. We're going to either be more loving or more hateful. We're going to be more forgiving or more bitter. We're going to be more generous or more greedy. And who you and I end up becoming by the end of this year is either going to happen on accident or it's going to happen intentionally. Now, if you want it to happen intentionally, if you want it to happen on purpose, I want you to know it can. And so what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up by me giving you a homework assignment that is going to feel very, very overwhelming. It's going to take a couple of hours. Oh. But it is the only assignment I'm going to give you the entire series. Okay, so this week's more about just kind of getting in our mind mentally, like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna start thinking about it. It's an assignment that comes out of Stephen Covey's book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Okay, what he does in his book is he actually challenges his readers to start with the end in mind. What do you want the end of your life to look like? It's like a GPS on your phone, right? If I want to go somewhere, I put my current, where I'm at currently, and then what my destination is, and I put it in there, and then I follow the GPS. So in his book, Stephen Covey says, hey, start with the end in mind. Figure out what you want your life to look like. So here's the assignment. In this series, I want you to take time to plan your funeral. That's so morbid, isn't it? Take some time to plan your funeral. Figure out, who do I want to be there, and what do I want them to say about me? How do you want to be remembered? Now, you don't have to take any action steps this week. Okay, because we'll get into what this looks like and how to do this in the coming weeks. And quite honestly, I'll put some resources on the website that'll make it easy for you. In fact, later on this week, we'll put some resources there that at least get you moving in this direction. And if you got a little bit of pushback and you're like, oh, I hate doing stuff like this, I'm not going to do it. That's fine. I'm not going to make you do it. You could continue to live an average life. Now, if you say, Dave, my life's already above average, I already know where I'm headed, then that's great. But I'm telling you, if you want your life to be different, if you want your marriage to be different, if you want your financial situation to be different, if you want your passion for God to be different, if you want your relationship with your kids to be different at the end of 2018 than it is today, then I'm telling you, I want you to do this exercise. It's going to be good for you. It's going to be healthy for you. And if you're like, well, I just need a little starting point, just right now, mentally, over the next week, just start thinking, okay, If there was one thing that was different at the end of this year about my life, what do I want it to be? Maybe you just say, I want to be known as a person of compassion, and right now I'm known as a person who's intense all the time. No mercy at all. Or maybe you say, I want people when they think of me to think of a generous person. I want people when they think about me to think about someone who was an encourager. Everywhere I went, I was encouraging people. Or I didn't have any enemies. I just didn't hold grudges. If you don't answer the question of who you want to be in life, I'm telling you, it's possible your influence will grow, you'll develop your personality, you'll hone your talents. I mean, life will continue to move forward, but at the end of the day, you will not have the substance and the structure to maintain it. Average people focus on what they want to do. Standout people focus on who they want to be. So come back next week. We're going to talk more specifically about what does this look like? What's the difference between average people and standout people? This is such an important series because at the end of 2018, your life could potentially look different as a result of what we talk about. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I thank you that you've made us unique. I thank you that you've given us passions and personalities. I thank you that you've given us opportunities and experiences. I pray in the coming weeks as we talk about these things that you would, by your Holy Spirit, teach us how to maximize these in a way that brings honor to you and allows our life to be above average. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.